Good morning, Wareham. Oh, wait a minute. Where's Mr. Gately?
All right. All right, soldiers from everywhere. Mr. Gately coming from everywhere. All right. He wanted you to film it.
Me? Why?
Well, he'd like you to film it. Okay. All right, so we're going to learn about all these soldiers from Europe, especially that helped America during the American Revolution. There was peace in Europe, and that was unusual. It was also a problem for European soldiers who knew no trade but fighting. So when the American Revolution began, many of Europe's soldiers knocked on Ben Franklin's door. Franklin was in France looking for help, financial help for the American cause. He wasn't really looking for out-of-work soldiers, but he sent many of them to America anyway. When the European soldiers got to America, many of them wanted to be generals, or at least the colonels. But American soldiers didn't want to fight under officers from other countries, especially those who couldn't even speak their language. That created some troubles. So, no one quite trusted the Marquis de Lafayette when he first landed in America. A Marquis, you can say Marquis or Marquis, is a French nobleman, like an English lord. This Marquis was very rich and noble in the best sense of the word. He was 19 years old. His father had died fighting the British. Lafayette wished to avenge his father, but he also believed in the liberty the Americans were fighting for. But in 1777, when he appeared in Philadelphia, he was taken for just another French soldier of fortune. "Thanks, but we don't need any more of your kind," was what he was politely told in French by James Lavelle, who was chairman of the Continental Congress's Committee of Foreign Applications. The Marquis would not be dismissed. He had bought a ship to come to America. Okay. He bought a ship. That's like buying a jet. Let's get that out.
So he's
Loaded.
wealthy.
Yeah, rich.
He's wealthy.
Right, very rich. And that's kind of why he got in. Because he's like, dude, I'll bring my own soldiers and I don't need any money. Then they went, oh, that's okay then. All right, so let's find out. He had paid for the soldiers who came with him. How much money? That's like owning a football team. He had even angered his king, who was not yet ready to take sides in this war. Lafayette wrote a letter to John Hancock, President of the Congress. He asked for two favors. The first is to serve at my own expense. The second is to begin my service as a volunteer. Now that was an unusual request. John Hancock paid attention, and so did George Washington. And that brings us to one of the nicest stories of the war. The lifelong friendship of Washington and Lafayette. They became like father and son, and neither was ever to be disappointed in the other. That's really true. He really loved George Washington. Like, he really admired what a man he was, how he always tried to do the right thing. So there was an actual friendship between them. It was really cool. Like a young knight, Lafayette wanted to prove himself in battle, and he did. He became a general on Washington's staff and suffered with the army during winter encampments. He fought well, and when he was wounded, his bravery endeared him to his men. He contributed much of his personal fortune to the American cause. Later, when he had a son, he named him George Washington. Lafayette was a nobleman and a hero. So was the Baron Friedrich von Steuben, even though he was a bit of an imposter. Von Steuben told Franklin that he had been a general on the staff of the King Frederick the Great of Prussia. That wasn't quite true. He was a captain in the Prussian army. Ben Franklin was not easily fooled. He saw through von Steuben right away. But he also saw that he was exactly what the army needed, a fine drill master. He thought von Steuben might be able to turn that untrained Continental Army into a professional fighting force. Franklin was right. Von Steuben had a happy personality, a lot of energy, professional knowledge of soldiering, and a roaring voice, even louder than Mr. Gately. He hollered at the American troops in a language that was a combination of German, English, and French, with a few swear words thrown in. He made himself understood, and he did exactly what Franklin thought he would do. He turned a disorderly group of recruits into skilled soldiers. He trained them to fight as Europe's soldiers fought, with muskets and bayonets. He taught them to follow complicated orders and execute complicated maneuvers. He made them as good as the best British troops. He was also smart enough to discover that there was something different about American soldiers. They were independent men who wouldn't take orders unless they understood the reason for them. In Europe, von Steuben said soldiers did what they were told. In America, he said, soldiers wanted to know why an order was given when they would do it. Then they would do it. Most of the soldiers who fought in the war were said to be Scotch-Irish. They, or their ancestors, had been poor farmers in Scotland who were lured to Northern Ireland by English promises of cheap land. They'd been fooled. Life in Northern Ireland was hard. So when they heard of the opportunities in America, 250,000 of them packed up and took their chances as indentured servants and headed across the ocean. Because they had moved about, they quickly thought of themselves as Americans, not Scotsmen or Irishmen or Virginians or Pennsylvanians. They were good soldiers. Chaim Solomon was not a soldier, but the help he gave the revolution was as important as that given on any battlefield. Solomon was Polish and a Jew. He had longed for religious freedom and liberty in his native country. But when Poland was invaded by Russia, Chaim Solomon had to flee. When he came to America, he felt at home. Solomon was a shy man who spoke several languages and had a talent for the language of business. He had a reputation for integrity. People trusted him. The British shouldn't have trusted him. When they captured New York, Solomon spied on them for the Patriot cause. He was captured, imprisoned, paroled, captured again, and imprisoned again. Finally, he fled to Philadelphia. Soon, in his quiet way, he won the confidence of the French who had come to the aid of America. The French made Solomon a general and their army paymaster. Robert Morris trusted him too. Morris, who was superintendent of finance for the Continental Congress, had the very difficult job of paying for the war. The colonies weren't much help. They raised very little money, and foreign countries didn't want to lend money to the Continental Congress. They doubted that the struggling new nation could beat mighty Britain or pay its bills. So, Morris turned to Chaim Solomon. Banks lent money to Solomon because they trusted him, even when they wouldn't lend it to the Congress. In Morris's diary, you can count 75 times that he went to Solomon for help. Members of the Continental Congress needed help too. Morris was unable to pay their salaries. James Madison, James Monroe, and Baron von Steuben were among those Solomon helped. But mostly, he helped the struggling army. Sometimes he dipped into his own pocket. When he had no more money to give, he turned to the Jewish community and to others. The Jews were few in number, but the ideals of the new nation spoke to them in a special way because they had often been persecuted in the old world. When he died in 1785, at age 45, Chaim Solomon was almost penniless. He had given his country everything he owned. All right. So a lot of different people helping out America. All right. So good night, everybody, and good night, Connor.
Good night, Connor.